They seem polite, helpful, always agreeable, always smiling. But you sense something, a subtle tension, a carefully measured tone, eyes that never quite settle, a voice that cracks under its own sweetness. They're not nice. They're scared. Friedrich Nietzsche warned us not to confuse submission with virtue, and not to mistake fear for goodness. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. But what about the people who never fight at all? Today we'll uncover one of Nietzsche's most psychologically haunting insights. Much of what we call goodness in others is not strength, but self-protection. Not everyone who avoids conflict is wise. Not everyone who stays silent is mature. Not everyone who smiles is kind. Many are simply afraid. Afraid of being rejected. Afraid of being exposed. Afraid of becoming the very thing they were told not to be. And in that fear, they learn to perform. Let's strip away the layers, not to judge, but to understand. Let's see what hides beneath the surface of politeness. Let's begin the journey into the darker corners of human behavior, not to dwell in them, but to illuminate what has long been hidden. Fear disguised as virtue. Nietzsche saw clearly what many of us feel intuitively, that most people are not moved by ideals, but by instinct. They don't act from love, they act from the terror of losing it. They don't act from truth, they act from the terror of being alone in it. This is what Nietzsche called slave morality. The morality of those who cannot act, who cannot fight, who cannot express desire without fear. Instead of saying, "I want this," they say, "That's selfish." "I am angry" becomes, "Anger is wrong." "I disagree" becomes silence. Polished into virtue. They label the strong as evil, not because the strong are cruel, but because the weak are afraid of power. The noble type of man experiences itself as value-creating. It does not need approval. But the one who cannot act must invent a morality that praises inaction. So they begin to call fear humility. They call avoidance peace. They call weakness goodness. And the world rewards them for it. Because a frightened person who calls themselves kind is easy to control. But beneath that mask of virtue is something darker, resentment. For example, consider Elena. Everyone loves her. She always remembers birthdays, never complains, and always volunteers to help. But deep down, she resents every favor she never wanted to give. Her smile is a fortress, her schedule a prison. Her kindness, a survival mechanism she learned to avoid rejection. Because once, long ago, her needs were met with abandonment. This is the trap Nietzsche warns us of, the quiet self-betrayal that slowly robs a person of their soul. Resentment hidden behind the smile. Nietzsche understood what modern psychology is still catching up to. When you repress your will, it doesn't vanish, it festers. He called it ressentiment, the silent, decaying bitterness that forms when someone denies their own power for too long. You see it in the passive-aggressive friend who never speaks directly. You feel it in the quiet employee who obeys but rolls their eyes when the manager turns away. You sense it in the overly sweet voice that drips with a buried fury. It is the rage of those who cannot afford to be seen as raging. It is the rebellion of the powerless, weaponized through silence, guilt, or moral superiority. Nothing on earth consumes a man more quickly than the passion of resentment. This is why niceness can feel heavy, why kindness can sometimes feel cold. Because it isn't kindness at all. It is a mask, a survival mechanism, a learned performance from a lifetime of punishment for speaking too loudly, wanting too much, or shining too brightly. Another story. Example, Jason is the ideal team player. Never argues, never challenges anyone. But his private journal is full of venomous entries about his boss and co-workers. He writes what he can't say. Every suppressed confrontation has become internal corrosion. The truly kind person doesn't need to prove it. They have nothing to hide. But the resentful one, they need applause. They need to be seen as good because they don't believe they are. The war beneath the skin. Imagine this. A child grows up in a household where anger means rejection, where desire is called selfish, where disagreeing is punished with silence or shame. So what does the child learn? To smile, to stay quiet, to be good. But goodness becomes a cage, and every year they carry that mask. They bury themselves a little deeper, until one day they don't even know what they feel. They only know how to be liked. He who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. They keep performing, thinking it will earn them love, thinking that if they are good enough, safe enough, soft enough, no one will leave. But inside, they are furious. Not at others, at themselves, for betraying their voice, for giving away their power, for choosing the illusion of peace over the truth of being. This war is silent, but it bleeds into every interaction. It shapes careers, marriages, friendships. It dictates the trajectory of a life that was never fully chosen, only allowed. And so, they keep showing up, smiling, offering help. But it's not generosity. It's fear wrapped in a bow. The price of the mask is their authenticity, and soon they forget it ever existed. Here's what Nietzsche believed. The goal is not to be seen as good. The goal is to become who you are, not a copy, not a mask, not a reflection of what others find comfortable, but something raw, real, dangerous in its honesty. What does your conscience say? You should become the person you are. To do this, you must reclaim your will, the will to act, the will to speak, the will to desire, the will to walk away. This is what Nietzsche called the will to power, but not power over others, power over the part of you that has been trained to obey. This is not a call to dominance. It is a call to aliveness. Think of a seed buried beneath thick soil. It doesn't rise out of hatred. It rises because it must. It was made to. The will to power is the light-seeking force in you, not to be loved, but to be real. Nina was always the peacekeeper in her family. As an adult, she became a therapist. She helped everyone but herself. One night, exhausted, she sat in silence and wrote a letter she never sent. I'm tired of being good. I want to be true. That was the night she stopped performing. That was the night she began to live. This is your awakening. When you stop asking, am I nice enough? And start asking, am I real enough? When you stop apologizing for your anger and start listening to what it's trying to tell you. When you stop contorting yourself to be liked and start shaping yourself to be true. This is how you break the cycle of resentment, by choosing courage over comfort, by choosing expression over approval, by choosing truth over performance. A gentle challenge. They're not nice, they're scared. And maybe sometimes so are you. But you don't have to stay there. You were not born to disappear behind a smile. You were not born to trade truth for applause. You were born to create values, to shape the world through your will, to become the person only you can become. That journey begins not in rebellion, but in remembrance of what you wanted, of what you buried, of what you still long to be. And one day you will rise, and your soul will dance, and no one will recognize you, because you will no longer be a shadow of what they needed you to be. you will have become dangerous, not because you seek to harm, but because you are no longer afraid to exist fully. So the next time you meet someone who seems endlessly nice, ask yourself, what are they afraid would happen if they weren't? And then ask it of yourself, because that's where the work begins. If this spoke to you, take a moment now, not to comment or subscribe, but to breathe. Ask yourself gently, where have I been performing? Where have I abandoned my will in the name of being seen as good? What have I silenced that now aches to be spoken? And what might happen if I stop pretending? Your real life begins where your mask ends. And that is Nietzsche's truth about people.